Coming off a less than stellar ESPN debut last weekend, there was a lot of hoopla this week about Andreas Hale, a combat sports writer for ESPN, who gave the show a C grade, which is an accurate grade, by the way. C, C+. I might even be generous and go B-, but it's somewhere in that range. I mean, you get no argument from me. But this is someone who writes for ESPN, WWE's new media rights partner, a partner that shelled out over $1 billion for the rights to air these PLEs for the next 5 years. And people absolutely lost their minds over this. He praised the women's championship match between Stephanie Vicaire and Io Sky, as did I. It was the best thing on the entire show. But he said everything else was either underwhelming or just a setup for a future match. I thought the mixed tag team match was fun for what it was. It wasn't outstanding or anything. It was very long. But it was a fun match. He gave Brock Lesnar against John Cena a C-. Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed against the Usos, he gave a C. The women's world title match, he gave a B+. The mixed tag match with CM Punk and AJ Lee against Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, he gave that a C. And the Cody Rhodes, Drew McIntyre main event, he gave that a C. He said the women's match saved this show from being truly average, and that for a card that promised to have epic moments, it fell a little short of expectations. Which is what happens when you use a lot of hyperbole to really hype up a show like this and then deliver the show that they did. They have nobody to blame for that but themselves as far as the way people felt about it. And if they don't like what people are saying about it, they should look in the mirror. There were a lot of fans who agreed with him, but also a lot of fans, the tribalists, who lost their minds over all this. And they couldn't believe that ESPN would post something critical on their main page, right? Since they work together with WWE. Even though before the show, one of the ESPN executives said that its wrestling writers would have full independence in their coverage and there would be a separation of church and state. You had JBL on his Something to Wrestle podcast, which is basically his now since Bruce Pritchard clearly does not want to go back to work and do it anymore. He actually said the writers should have found a way to get creative and give the show an A grade, whether they believed it or not. Because this was their big debut on ESPN, and they shouldn't be criticizing the show. Or have someone writing on their behalf criticizing the show. He really said this. He said the quiet part out loud. I almost have to hand it to him. I have to respect him for saying the quiet part out loud. He said that when that's the first thing people see on the website for the company paying hundreds of millions of dollars for the product, I just don't think that looks good. Yeah, no shit. Then put out a better product. What he's saying is, lie and pretend that it was a great show even if you think it wasn't. If ESPN believes what they say, and they said there would be a separation of church and state in its coverage, then this is what their coverage is supposed to look like. They want it to at least come off like their coverage is independent and fair and honest. Whereas JBL is looking at it simply as a business relationship. It's a product. If you want it covered like a real sport, that's not how this works. However much money ESPN might be paying out to Major League Baseball or the NFL for the games that they carry, if there's a major story about either league that paints them in a bad light, right? Some controversy about steroids or concussions or what have you, right? They would have writers covering that story and amplifying that story, no matter how badly the league might come across. That's how it's supposed to work. If you want to be taken seriously. Evidently, JBL doesn't feel that's important. And I'm not saying ESPN would cover WWE that way if there was a big story that painted WWE in a bad light, like the Janelle Grant stuff or some other big lawsuit that gets filed against the company. It's entirely possible they would downplay it and they wouldn't give it the coverage that it deserves. Time will tell how much they really believe in church and state when that happens. But when it comes to these shows, it was a breath of fresh air that they didn't pull the review or they didn't try to hide it when he posted it. It was refreshing to see. It's still only one man's opinion. Just like when Dave Meltzer, he drops his star ratings for a show. It's one man's opinion. And everybody loses their minds over it. But his voice carries more weight than most because he's been covering wrestling for over 40 years. The Observer was the standard for wrestling news for a long time. So if you're in the wrestling bubble, you probably know who Dave Meltzer is. You've at least heard the name before. It's still just one man's opinion. I mean, look, he just posted his star ratings for AEW All Out, okay, in the last newsletter. I thought some of the ratings were completely ridiculous. I mean, once he broke the 5-star scale years ago, the whole thing became laughable to me. Like, he ruined it. Absolutely ruined it. But that's his scale. If he wants to ruin it, that's his prerogative. He can do that. But then I see Dustin Rhodes quote tweeting the ratings and then posting, "That's why we at AEW are the best." You know damn well, if Meltzer would have posted something negative about a Dustin Rhodes match, he'd be the first person tweeting Dave asking if he's ever taken a bump before in his life. You know, talk shit when you lace up a pair of boots, Mark. I mean, it's like, it's one person's opinion. But when that person writes for ESPN, in the eyes of everyone, it becomes ESPN's opinion, right? They've co-signed it. They've endorsed it. That Wrestlepalooza wasn't a great show. Not really, but like, you know what? If that's how people look at it, that it's ESPN's opinion, if that's what gets WWE's attention, then good. I hope it does get their attention. You know, on WrestleVotes Radio, they claim that people within WWE didn't expect ESPN to go out of its way to publish such a low rating for the event, especially since this was their debut on the platform. And backstage, the feeling was that Wrestlepalooza was no different than any other PLE, which honestly is part of the fucking problem. But to them, it made it feel like the C grade was unusually critical. And the backstage reaction, they say, highlighted a sense of confusion, as many assumed that ESPN would treat the show more favorably given the significance of the partnership. Instead, the review created a wave of discussion online with fans and critics debating whether the grade was too harsh or an honest assessment of the event. Yes, it was an honest assessment. It's an assessment that I happen to share. Now, we know Paul Levesque doesn't give a shit about what the critics have to say and what shows like this have to say, because he made that very clear earlier this year around WrestleMania time. If you remember that interview where he sat down with Peter Rosenberg and he said, "This is going to sound defensive," because it did. He was sounding very defensive when he said this. But he said, "I wish I could tell people, fuck off being a critic. Be a fan. Go watch this and be a fan." So what he's telling you is that you should not be watching WWE and thinking critically about the show that you're watching. You know, there are fans that aren't a part of the online discourse. Maybe they watch casually. Maybe they watch with their kids. Right? That's fine. All different kinds of fans who watch for all different types of reasons. Some longtime fans, some newer fans. But it's the ones that dare say anything critical about the product. It's really something to hear the chief content officer admitting that, you know, what he really wants to do is tell all of those people to fuck off. You know, I enjoy talking about wrestling, as if you couldn't tell. I've been doing it long enough. I enjoy interacting with other fans most of the time on social media and in the YouTube chats. There are things I like. There are things I don't like. And the things that people don't like often get amplified more than the things that they do. That's just the nature of the internet. Like, I'll do a video praising something or praising someone, and it'll get 5,000 views. I do one segment talking about Bret Hart burying people, and it gets 40,000 views. It's like, that's just how it is. Look at cable news. Actually, don't look at cable news. It's fucking horrendous. But if you do look at it, or really just the news in general these days, it's probably 90% negative. You know, 15 people got shot. This person is embroiled in a sex scandal. Hurricane Jerry just wiped out 5 cities and is headed for New York. Russia and Ukraine are still bombing each other. Unemployment was up again this week. Like, I feel like I'm singing a Billy Joel song here. But then in the last 5 minutes of the newscast, we've got a heartwarming story about an 8-year-old boy who runs his own lemonade stand, and the lemons he uses might hold the cure for cancer. This is the world we live in. This is what sells. I try not being overly negative because there's enough negativity in this world. Wrestling should be an escape from all that, but I'm not going to sugarcoat shit. And nobody else should feel compelled to do so either, no matter what outlet they work for. It doesn't mean that you're going to spoon feed me even when it tastes bad, and I'm going to say, "Oh, thank you. May I have another scoop?" He went through his honeymoon phase, Triple H did, and that was only going to last so long. Now that people are being more critical about what they see, Week to week on these shows, his natural instinct is to tell those people to fuck off. He probably wanted to tell ESPN the same thing this week. But ESPN may be the one party here that he can't tell to go fuck off. He'll just need to do better next time. And if articles like that one, if reviews like that one help make for a better show next time, then everyone should be cheering that, not bashing the man for his opinion.